So as we begin our conversation today, I'd like to share that eQuo is founded on core principles of unity in diversity, equality, inclusion, and mutual respect. And with this in mind, we're thankful, all of us, to be able to work, live, and play on the lands and waters of Canada, Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous people from the very beginning. As settlers, we recognize and deeply appreciate the generations of Aboriginal peoples who have taken care of this land and are ever grateful for their contributions that they've made in shaping and strengthening communities across our great nation. We at eQuo and our members strive to find meaningful ways to work together and also positively contribute to the strength of Canada and to our rural and urban Indigenous communities. And for those who are not familiar with eQuo, I'm going to share a brief overview about who we are, and then we'll get right into our conversation of the day. Even though 90% of entrepreneurs are building small companies, meaning they're below 10 million ARR, the ecosystem has predominantly focused on startups and scale-ups. At eQuo, we recognize that most founders and companies have really been unsupported for far too long. And with that, we're working to change all of this. We'll be the first inclusive matchmaking platform to connect small business with investors, capital, customers, and talent, so that companies from startups to 10 million can get to the next level. Our platform will also be the first marketplace for accredited and retail investors to find and invest in small business. If you really want to learn some more about that and support our mission with as little as a $250 investment, visit frontfunder.com/equal. And with that, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining such an important conversation about how we can change the landscape for women investors and entrepreneurs. Joining me today are Joanne Fedeko, founder of Canadian Women's Network, Hessie Jones, venture partner at Matter Ventures, Brenda Holleran, chair of Startup Canada, Surbi Galera Joshi, founder of Purna Wellness, and Zainab Williams, founder of Alverity. Of course, they do a lot more than that, but we can only talk so much about their successes. So with that, let's just dive right in. We had a great conversation, all of us, last week, kind of setting up and preparing for this. And I think we've got tons of really valuable information to share with you all. So with that, I'm going to reference the Veuve Clicquot study that was recently done on the women entrepreneurship, the Barometer Global Report of 2021. And they note that the #1 structural barrier for female founders is in attracting funding. And with raising funding is definitely an exciting but intimidating process for most small businesses, and can be especially daunting for women, since the majority of venture capital firms are run by men. Hessie, I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what kind of roadblocks you're seeing women facing as they try and source the funding that they need to launch, maintain, and or scale their business.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Barry, for having me here. Yeah, this is an interesting question because I am a huge, I guess, studier of history, especially when it comes to any kind of like systemic issues with not only funding but and how decisions are made. So I did do a little bit of research on this because I realized that one of the most successful funds, which is Kapoor Capital, they produced a report that actually talked about how old school investment firms have actually caused real world problems because not only because they're not investing in minority or women founders, but they're proactively creating terrible outcomes in the world. And they called this the VC 1.0 gone wrong. And so for this company that invests in women in diversity, they argued that superior financial returns shouldn't be a primary motivator to shift the gap and to close investment. In fact, the singular focus on financial returns comes really at the expense of ignoring all the other impacts that a business has, whether or not it's negative, neutral, reputational damage, growth, etc. So, but they claim that the system it's run off its course and it's not really sustainable. In fact, so just to give you an idea, they invested in a portfolio of 102 companies led by over 50% women and people of color. And they focused on issues like addressing educational inequality, climate change, job creation for those who were formerly incarcerated. And these returns had actually made more money than peer funds that actually solely sought to produce profit. So when we talk about structural issues, bias is a big part of that. And so there, in the first part, where you're actually trying to gain some visibility with VCs, the pitching process can be a daunting part of that. But bias in the pitching process actually influences decision making from a VC perspective. So there was one study done where pitches voiced by men significantly outperformed those with compared to women who are narrators. In fact, they're saying that pitches where the narrator was an attractive man performed best overall. Outcomes were actually the same, regardless of whether or not like the judges or the VCs were male or female. And the conclusion from this was that the investors would prefer pitches presented by male entrepreneurs versus female, even when the content of the pitch is the same. So when we talk about bias, it also comes in when the VCs are asking questions of these entrepreneurs. What they found was that women were asked very different questions than men when they're pitching. Men were consistently asked more opportunity type questions, highlighting the upside of the market opportunity, the potential gains, versus women who are actually asked more preventative questions. So potential losses, risk mitigation, whether or not there was a product market fit. And what came out of it was that entrepreneurs who actually addressed opportunity questions raised at least 6 times more money than those who were asked more preventative questions, which in most cases were women. And the third part of this is more personal to the different genders. There is this confidence gender gap that exists where women tend to undervalue themselves in very competitive situations. And so in some cases, this may come off as them being less sure of themselves. This is anecdotal, but this also comes from experience, and there's a lot of qualitative studies that tend to corroborate this sense of this confidence gap. And to kind of belie that, women tend to use more metrics to sell their story versus men who normally present a big picture. And so it's been debated that this may actually be a strength and not necessarily a handicap for women. But for VCs who traditionally look for these outperformers, they will be underwhelmed by women who actually use this more measured style of pitching. So those are some of the structural, I say, barriers that we see today.
Yeah, incredible, incredible that you could have the same exact pitch and it be delivered by a man versus a woman and get a completely different reaction. Insane. Joanna, can I throw it over to you? And maybe you can share some of the positive journeys that you've seen women take to successfully secure that funding and overcome a lot of the barriers that Hessie was just talking about.
Yeah, and I referenced the one TED Talk that came from the preventative versus promotion questions. So just simply changing the way that women respond in those meetings. And it was proven that both men and women VCs ask women those prevention questions, where both men and women VCs ask men promotion questions. So being aware of that and being able to change that. And I think that's a conscious thing that women can do. It's such a great time for women to be fundraising right now, because funds are not all, but there's a lot that are focused on very intentionally trying to support and invest in diversity, and diverse sort of founders, but it still really comes down to the founder herself and how she presents herself. So the best thing is, making sure that you feel the confidence, that you have the vision, that you're able to project yourself, that your numbers well, maybe not in all metrics style, but just being able to speak to it. At the end of the day, investors are investing in the founder and the founding team. So forums like this, what Startup Canada has, what the Canadian Network has, are really good places to go to in order to, if you need to exercise your muscle in some of those areas, get over imposter syndrome, polish your pitch, feel like you have the confidence, know that you're not alone, because everyone's struggling with this, having that. I think it's about attending and kind of finding this community that can support you through this journey. What I've seen done really well is that when founders really know who they're targeting for the investors and they're intentional about it. Too often people come to someone like me and says, I'm fundraising, who do you know? And it's really about building that list of the targeted influencers or investors, and doing that over time and not doing it when you need it. Start a list of people that you see, that you think that might be a good contact, and every week send out 3 messages to them. Reach out on Twitter, follow them, listen to what they're talking about, and just start to build your own target list, so that when you go to fundraise, you know exactly who your targets are, and people like me can be helpful to you, versus it being very broadly. And last thing I'm going to say is, I don't know if I've seen a lot of women do this. I've seen a few, but I believe in it, which is just build your own personal board of directors. This sort of goes back to what is it that we need on the confidence side? So I recently hired an executive coach, and I wish I did that 20 years ago. It's been like a game changer for me. And it's not these long hours and hours and let's just talk about things. It's no, what are you going to do right now to level up? And there's even group forums that we offer as well within the CWN, for executive coach, but not the traditional style, but again, a coach, maybe a storyteller, somebody that can help you polish your pitch, thinking about, people that are founders that have already raised, that would listen to you. Just think about that. And that board of directors will change as you level and grow up your business. But just being more thoughtful and intentional about who you're surrounding yourself with and who your targets are.
That's awesome. And really, when you can practice that pitch and you can practice it with people that have a level of expertise that would be able to kind of point out the areas where you can strengthen and whatnot, is huge to help your confidence. I mean, you're going to be nervous enough pitching something that obviously you've been building for a while. So the more help you can get, the more support you can get, the better. Absolutely. Thank you. That's great advice. I'm going to kind of flip the conversation a little bit. Oh, and actually, before I do that, there are people that are raising their hands. We are going to do a bit of a formal Q&A session between myself and the ladies that are up here right now. And then we will open the floor up for additional questions from the audience. If you guys can just be patient, we will absolutely get to you. So there was a study, a 2021 study done by Fidelity, called Women and Investing. And it notes that on average, women investors achieve positive returns and surpass men by 40 basis points, or 0.4%. They're doing better than men are from an investing standpoint, which is awesome. And this really is largely due to kind of a buy and hold strategy, whereas men seem to be a bit more risk taking or risk averse. They take more risks. Regardless, it seems that only a third of women overall feel confident in their ability to make investment decisions, and as such are losing out on some serious potential looking forward. Zainab, the mission of your company is to empower women to speak, to walk, and own their financial truth. Can you share some of your thoughts as to why women lack this financial confidence, and maybe some advice on how they can flip that script?
Absolutely, Jennifer. In my practice, I have noticed that even some of the most financially educated women will make comments like, I still don't know this, I should be doing more of X, Y, and Z, and I should have more of this. And this type of self-expression that translates to women being perceived as lacking financial confidence. But in the grand scheme of things, what matters more? Feeling that I'm not confident, or the fact that I've actually accomplished various goals? And these are the same women who have built investment portfolios to purchase their first house while taking care of aging parents. They have invested into their businesses and they have enough cash flow to make payroll over the next 24 months, even in the most challenging of times. And none of these accomplishments can be captured from a question like, do you feel financially confident? And this feeling also pigeonholes women into believing that if you don't understand the financial jargon, then you should not be taking any risks. You shouldn't be reaching out to investors for capital because you're not there yet. When in fact, women are much more risk aware. They want to invest based on their values and goals. And as an industry, we need to start understanding how women view risks and take risks without downplaying this process and claiming that women don't know anything about finances. So let's really start talking about how risk is not static. It's a muscle that is built over time with the decisions that we make. So therefore, ladies, let's start bench pressing those money muscles, because we do accomplish more than what we give ourselves credit for. And there's no issue at all with talking about money and our vulnerabilities, because when we start talking about it, we start to understand that we're not alone. And using virtual investment platforms also helps us in start practicing how to invest and becoming more exposed to new concepts. And most importantly, let's start advocating for ourselves. If we're not getting the guidance and support that we need to be at peace of letting go of relationships that are undermining our financial well-being.
That's awesome. A great piece of advice. Sometimes we get in our own ways, don't we? And just need to have that, to have a bit more confidence in ourselves and in knowing what we are, confidence in what we actually know versus what we don't know. Brenda, I'm gonna kind of flip this conversation a little bit. You being on the board of Startup Canada, maybe you can share some insight as to the innovation we're seeing from some of these underestimated entrepreneurs, and why looking at investing in them is something worth consideration.
You know, that's a wonderful question. And Zainab, you're just the perfect example, absolute perfect example of why it's so important. Well, all of the panelists on why it's so important to invest in women. And what I find really interesting is that, you know, we have through Startup Canada, we're seeing incredibly different innovation from women founders and entrepreneurs. It's not the typical tech and savvy stuff that you're kind of used to hearing about. You know, we hear a lot about all the apps being created, all these wonderful things happening. But what women are doing is the actual innovative work of running business with a lot of issues that they have to deal with. So you know, we've seen businesses that they're creating beautiful scarves out of recycled plastic, innovative laundry strips, to food security, to food products, to not-for-profit organizations that help women who are surviving domestic abuse and things like that. Things that we don't think of as traditional innovation, and it's such important innovation for families, for the community, and for Canada. So it's something I just wanted to talk about is, you know, we all know that Canada's women entrepreneurs are disproportionately impacted by what's been happening. And the industries most heavily hit by COVID, including hospitality, tourism, and education, tend to host higher concentrations of women. According to a recent Canadian Labour Force survey, employment levels among women, particularly those with children, has dropped more than men at the outset of the lockdown. Of about 1 million Canadians who lost their jobs in March, 60% were women, leading, of course, to the term we've heard of she-cession. In our 2019 Canadian Entrepreneurship Census, Startup Canada found women entrepreneurs were more than 20% less confident about their future success as they struggled with accessing support, resources, finance, training, and global markets. And additionally, women deal with unpaid caretaking, household labor, wage inequality, and the list just goes on. There's so many, you know, so many boundaries that women have to deal with just to sit down at a desk on their laptops, working with their team on creating the innovation they'd like to see. And, you know, we all know that venture capitalism is bias, it's an issue, but it's also about the goals of venture capitalists versus those of women entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurs are perceived to be less ambitious and profitable, but the statistics show otherwise. So my concern is that if we don't invest in women and in marginalized entrepreneurs,
Right.
that we're going to miss out on something that could be critical to the success of our nation. It could be a massive, massive innovation that would change the world. But if women aren't given true access to money and these innovations are never discovered, what a shame that will be, and shame on us, and shame on the VCs, and shame on the banks, because there's a lot of organizations who are trying to help women, and organizations like Startup Canada. Joanne, thank you for the shout out. Startup Canada, for those who are listening, it has a wealth of information on how you can access government funding and private sector funding. There's a lot of money available for women, but it's really hard to find it. So the organization sifts through all of that and opens those doors so that you don't have to. But if we just don't do it, what's going to happen? And so I think the next panel, we've been discussing this for how many years? How many? What's changed?
Too many.
Nothing. So it's time to get the VCs on a panel and some of the heads of banking, and let's ask them, let's make them answer why, and what are you going to do about it? Because Canadian women represent 50% of the population, and we hold a lot of power, and we're not being recognized or funded or supported in this. And it's time to push back.
I love it. I love it. Great points there. So certainly with our audience here today, as you're looking at investing, please look at women entrepreneurs and see what solutions they're providing and invest in that. And beyond that, there's a ton of resources that are available to those ladies that are trying to start up and trying to raise funding. And I'm sure we'll touch on that even more as we continue our conversation here. Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm going to flip back to the Clicquot report. We talked about the structural barriers that we're seeing ladies face, but they also note the top 3 mental barriers for women founders. The number one is fear of failure. Number 2, the need to change their behavior to be more manly. And number 3, the criticism that they face. Serbi, can you talk to us about what us ladies can do to help overcome some of these mental obstacles that we're seeing?
Absolutely, Jennifer. And I think that's absolutely, like, you've highlighted some of the mental hurdles, and we've been talking about in terms of like how the landscape currently is. It doesn't support where women have proven themselves time and time again. And I think what's really missing is that for women to recognize in terms of the expectations that not just what we are put, like what the society expects from us, but we put on ourselves. So a lot of us with COVID, a lot of women either were let go and never rehired, or a lot of them had to be being the primary caregiver, never actually returned to work. So there's a huge number of women who are transitioning to becoming entrepreneurs because it provides them the flexibility, which a lot of employers are not able to. And going into that, what we don't realize is there's this mindset shift that needs to happen, because the world, that landscape that we see outside, doesn't really support where women are right now. So there's a huge shift that needs to happen in identity, like identity in terms of how we see ourselves and how, for example, VCs perceive the stereotypical idea of what a woman can do. And this applies for what we call at eQuo underestimated groups. So it's not just women we're talking about. We were talking about people of color, with people with special abilities, different ability. So we're talking about anybody who's not the conventional founder that we've seen so far. So the mindset shift really needs to happen with breaking down that we need to invest on ourselves.
Yes.
That requires building your support team. So you would have someone who's making sure that the things you can delegate at your home, things are taken care of. You are supported mentally. You have your group of network of people who are your supporter cheerleaders. I think that's extremely important. And this is the time that we need to work together with the people, like-minded organizations, communities, and there are tons of them. It's a matter of us reaching out rather than struggling alone, because a lot of us think we're the only ones who are dealing with self-doubt, lack of confidence, fear of failure, the imposter syndrome. So that's something that it's a very human thing. There's nothing to be ashamed of it. We just have to surround ourselves with the right group of supporters.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Brenda, as a boomerpreneur yourself, and even me being of middle age, I think I identify with some of those top 3 mental barriers. But as we age, we were typically raised with a very traditional roles mindset of men versus women, what the men is supposed to do versus what the women are supposed to do. Does the older generation, in your opinion, see the same mental barriers, or are things a little bit different as we age?
That is such a great question. I've thought a lot about it since we've been given it. And I think that older women in my group, we've gone through a lot, and we've survived a lot, and we've gone through broken marriages and loss of homes and loss of income and having to rebuild ourselves many, many times. So I think as you age, you develop your own resilience and your own strength to overcome things that life throws in your way. So for women that I know, and I know a lot of older women, and we call them boomerpreneurs, which was coined by Barry. We hated the word seniorpreneur because baby boomers will never be seniors. But boomerpreneurs, they still have so much to do and so much to offer. And I think a mistake that's being made is that we're losing a lot of that corporate knowledge and a lot of these people out of the workforce. And I think that we've got to draw them back in as mentors and as people, as support, get them on boards, get them to invest in you, ask them to help you out. Let's not lose the resources that are just waiting to be asked. And as a boomerpreneur, you're in a different mindset because you have more security behind you quite often, in the form of just financial security. The children have moved out. You don't have all those household responsibilities. And we're seeing that more and more, that a large majority of the new innovative businesses and just new small businesses are led by older adults and older women. And they're inventing the coolest stuff. So, you can be 95 and an entrepreneur. And I think we have to get past ageism and the mindset that, once you kind of leave the work sector, you have now time to give back a lot of information, a lot of support. And I find that in eQuo, that's something that I really love, is that we're talking about boomerpreneurs and we're looking at how are we going to engage this huge population of currently retiring baby boomers who still have a lot to give, a lot of money, a lot of time and investment. So I think as especially older women, I think we've had enough life scars, and it's time to get on with it, and nothing will stop us.
That's phenomenal, and an awesome segue into the next portion of our conversation here. Joanne's mentioned this, Serbi's mentioned this, Zanab's mentioned this, Brenda, you have as well. We've all heard that adage. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and that support network is essential for any entrepreneur's success. I was reading a stat from the publisher Inc., and they noted that 48% of female founders report a lack of available advisors and mentors, which ultimately will limit their professional growth, particularly as you're looking at being an entrepreneur. Joanne, I'm going to flip back to you. With the majority of high-level businesses really in the world still being dominated by men, how can women blaze their own path and facilitate the introductions and connections that they're going to need to support to support their entrepreneurial journey?
We have to get comfortable with asking for it and just going out there and reaching. we should always be building our networks. And I think sometimes we're very just heads down doing the work and not necessarily thinking about, again, those relationships that we need to build. We're sort of looking maybe one step ahead instead of thinking about like the 10 steps down the road. So, build your network well before you need it. Your network is your net worth. All of these quotes that exist out there are true. Largely, you're not going to know how somebody is going to be able to be helpful to you at the moment that you meet them. Treat everybody like with kindness and respect. I always say, treat the janitor the same way that you treat the CEO, and just, form some authentic relationships as you are building your company, and they will be your gold and your diamonds in the future for sure. I think it goes back to just, again, thinking a bit more strategically about who you want and not being afraid to reach out to them. So, I said, pick 3 people that you choose to reach out to every week, and pick some big, bold names. Pick people that are out of reach. Pick people that you think, oh gosh, her, him, they've had all that success. They look, that all that they've achieved. And you'll be surprised at how many people will respond to you. People want to just innately give back. But if we don't ask them for that, and if we don't build authentic relationships with them early on, I mean, you can't obviously just go in and say, hi, you've achieved all this well, and I would like you to, now mentor me like every week, or, do something for me. So I think it's about that. And I think we have to just keep thinking about how we stand out, how we position ourselves uniquely. That some people do it very visibly with like, oh, I remember her. She always wears bright colors. She always has such positive energy. It could be that, wow, she really like knows her numbers. She knows her company back and forward. She knows the competition. It could be sending a video message instead of doing just a simple email or something. But be always building that network, be consistent out there, be unique and memorable. And that's all.
Oh, that's great. And really, I mean, if you don't try, you'll never know, right? And the
right.
worst they can say is no. And if you have, if you're zeroed in on a particular type of individual that you need in your network, then you can move on to somebody else if it doesn't work out. Not a huge deal. And actually, that actually brings me to another question. As we look at finances, Zainab, can you maybe share your thoughts from a financial standpoint, kind of that big broad category, as a female entrepreneur? What kind of a network, what types of folks should I be looking for from a financial standpoint to support my entrepreneurial journey, or even just from the start?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I think even just before we even start diving into the types of connections that we need to be looking for, it's important to go back to the drawing board on those non-glamorous topics, because we need to start understanding our own personal finance and relationship with money, because it really plays a key role to our survival journey and how we show up into the world, and also how we connect with potential investors or potential key partners. So I will say the first one would be managing our cash flow, because we need to start becoming brave enough to check in on a weekly basis, our revenues and expenses, because in the beginning, it's quite intimidating because you're still trying to create a process and understand how you can navigate through this journey. I've seen so many entrepreneurs like remortgage their homes multiple times because they have cash flow constraints. But when you ask them where are these challenges, where are the business challenges stemming from, they don't take the time to understand what exactly is the issue. And it's quite a vicious cycle of financial stress and burnout. And when you're trying to seek investments, these are the types of discussions you have with potential investors. How well do you know your business inside and out? How much time are you spending to really understand what are the actual gaps you need to be closing? And another point I'd like to bring up as well is we need to start remembering that having and maintaining good credit is critical for us, because it allows us to have access to capital while we're still looking for investors. Because if you haven't been funded, you rely on bootstrapping your business, you rely on grants. You can also get a part-time gig while you're trying to finance your business and really just sustain yourself. And so when you do have good credit, it allows you to have that leverage to seek loans that have favorable terms so that you can continue funding your project without any constraint. And lastly, Joanne has touched on this, Brenda as well has touched on this. It is important to be comfortable to ask for help, especially to people in the ecosystem who have worked on similar projects, or they have a great understanding of the problems you are trying to find a solution to, because you will have a shortened learning curve and the cost of making mistakes is drastically reduced.
That's awesome. And I mean, there's a gazillion challenges that we may have from a financial standpoint, but cash flow is definitely one of those really, really big ones that you need to keep on. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Hessie, can I ask you, are there other key categories that we need to be aware of as an entrepreneur that we need to prioritize as we're looking to network and grow that network?
I'm just gonna kind of solidify some of the stuff that both Joanne as well as I mentioned. But I mean, when we talk about growing your network and not being afraid to ask, there are ways that you can do it without having to follow convention. And like, I'm a big proponent of social networks, especially Twitter, because Twitter has allowed you access to VCs, to entrepreneurs, in a way that doesn't feel like you're putting yourself totally out there. And like I just had a meeting with my colleagues, and we're talking about being able to crowdsource ideas from the community, because we're a first-time fund. So, you know, we have less experience in the hedge fund space, private equity, etc. But, you know, if we ask questions and we get feedback from the community, that's awesome. And at the same time, you're growing your network. Twitter Spaces is another one that allows you to just maybe hold a feedback, what's it called, session about your product. Put your product out there and just get a bunch of people to come in the room and say, what do you think? Yeah. Right? And so those are the kinds of things. But I also want to make sure that, like, as you're growing as a business, that you recognize your own strengths as a CEO and whether or not you're going to maintain that role long term. So that it's critical for you to really understand, how is this company going to grow and what's the best way to do that? Is that with me, or is that with somebody else at the helm? And that also means, who are the people that you want to hire, right? And I would say that because technology is moving so fast, you need to be front and center in understanding what are the legislations out there that may be impeding me, but also understand, like, what are the technologies that I could actually take you know, to my business to see how it can grow. And from that perspective, it's like this emergence of Web3 out there. Nobody really understands, like, the cryptocurrency side or the NFT side, but if you want to be able to understand, if I want to get in that space, what does that mean for my infrastructure? So last thing, always keep at the back of your mind, I'm thinking, Survey, when I say this, is that think of your mental health, think of your time management. All those have to be integrated into your calendar so that you're scheduling time for yourself as much as you're scheduling time to network for the business.
Perfect segue, Hessie. Thanks, and great thoughts there for the group. This is gonna be kind of our last formal question, and then we'll kind of open the floor up. But our mental health and taking time for ourselves is hugely important. The roadblocks and negativity and ongoing uphill battles that us as entrepreneurs are battling can certainly take a toll on both our physical and our mental well-being. And then add COVID on top of that. I mean, geez. So, Survey, can you maybe give us some high-level strategies or tactics that we can all employ to really just help catch our collective breath?
Yeah, Jennifer, I think that's a great question. And really, there is a lot of pressure that I think entrepreneurs feel in general, like in terms of putting themselves out there and being this pressure of success, right? Like we have to succeed and it has to be done fast and it has to be a unicorn and it has to be like all of these expectations of what it is to be a successful startup. And I really think that it is a very personal journey, and it is a marathon and it is a long sort of course for what it is for you to run a fulfilling enterprise as you grow it. So I think it really is important for the founder to be able to sustain themselves. So when I'm building my wellness journey, if I'm talking about wellness and I'm not practicing it on myself, I can't sustain. I'm going to get burnt out. So it's really important for me that I'm taking time in the mornings to do my exercise, do my meditation, eat healthy during the day. And I'm not perfect. Like I mess up a lot of times, but I'm constantly striving to manage my stress. And this is really key because there's a lot of pressure that we're going to constantly get. And I think it comes back to women really owning, and this is for any individual, really owning your uniqueness and your wholeness as a human being, and knowing that that you have to really kind of be fulfilled at the end of the day with what you're doing, your decisions. So making sure that whatever choices you make, like even if you're choosing to stay at home and be a homemaker and be good at it, or you're choosing to start a business, I think that's a society I see where there is freedom to choose without judgment, and you are able to thrive wherever you are and not feel like you're constantly like you're living up to others' expectations. So there's a little bit of a lot of self-work, I think, that goes into standing up for who you are and going with what you believe in.
That's great. And again, like you said, like that information isn't just specific to women. We all need to ensure that our cups are full enough, or that we have the energy and the to move forward with all of those challenges. So taking that time for yourself and figuring out what you need to be able to do that from a mental standpoint is key to the success of your company. Thank you very much for your thoughts there. Barry has been so graciously manning the Q&A. So I'm going to toss it over to him to take some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Jennifer. Fantastic conversation so far. This is a question from Latoya to everyone. How do the panelists see the Great Resignation impacting women, especially as they're now entering the arena of starting and/or growing a business during this?
I'll start.
Thanks, Joanne.
I think it's such a great opportunity. You know, we also, I'm big into this like positive what if statements these days instead of like the negative side, but let's look at the positive side of things. It's such a competitive time. And it's unique, and we're not sure how this like year ahead of us is unfolding, because it's just going to continue to sort of get more competitive out there as we're going back to the office and we're figuring out like what these requirements are, and we're wondering, okay, well, we've had 2 years off now. Do we actually want to go into that box anymore? Like, how do I create the life that I want for myself, given those constraints? And some of those options might be, again, building their own company or doing something on the side or being more of a freelancer out there. So I think it's a time to take a pause and really look at it and think about how we want our lives to look moving forward, and then what fits into that, and how do we fit it in. And it's not binary, and it's not one answer or another, but I think it's a holistic approach to it. And I think what Survi said, I just love like the wellness journey piece, right? That's one big thing that I hope we won't miss from this last couple of years, is just how important our own wellness is to ourselves and to others, and to think about that as we're also planning, you know, the growth or scale of our business, or professionally, personally.
So true, Joanne.
So true.
Did anybody else? Yeah, Hessie, go right ahead.
Yeah, I also think that I think as small businesses, we need to rethink how we create an environment that is welcoming of, these types of changes that are happening in everywhere. I mean, I came from advertising years ago, and you never really talked about, if you had a migraine or you're not feeling well that day, that you just couldn't go to work. These days, I'm seeing that even those same ad agencies that where people are tasked to do so many hours and they're burnt out, that they're now starting to respond to people. And I think small businesses and entrepreneurs who start to bring in people have to have that kind of philosophy in order to make sure that their businesses aren't adversely affected the same way that large businesses are.
That's phenomenal. I mean, really, entrepreneurs have a huge opportunity to bring in a lot of those folks that have escaped the rat race, as it were, and create a really welcoming environment for them that's adaptable to their personal situation.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that as well. I think the last 2 years has had a profound impact on society and family and norms and traditions. And women are so resilient, and we've had to reinvent ourselves many times through our lives. That's just been part of being a woman and being in business and being a mom and a daughter and a sister and a wife and a partner and a spouse. We have to be so many things to so many people. Excuse me. So after 2 years of kind of looking at yourself, and Serbi, you say such wonderful things. I think women are realizing traditional roles and the traditional world, as we've kind of been following along, has really changed, and things are eroding, but things are getting really exciting. So there is a lot more people talking about opportunities for women that wasn't there, a couple of years ago. There is more government funding. There is more people thinking, I'm going to take that chance. I'm going to take that risk. I've been at home. I've been developing something. I have an idea. So why not try it? This might be the perfect opportunity to try it. So everybody who's listening, if you've got an idea and you think it's pretty good, follow the advice that this panel is giving you. Joanne's so right. Reach out to your friends and your networks. And as women, we tend to be a little bit hesitant. Well, we don't have to be. Who says we have to be? We can do it. And having opportunities to discuss it and seeing other women and the breathtaking roads they're taking us and the opportunities they're leading for us makes you a little bit less to think about reinventing yourself, pivoting, trying something new, and changing a little part of your world. So my advice to women is, don't be afraid. Don't let the system, the traditional system, hold us back and keep us hesitant and afraid. We can do this.
That's great, Brenda. Thank you so much. Obviously, this webinar and everything that we've been talking about is going gangbusters. The amount of questions that we have is insane. So with that, while you guys all have such awesome insight and intelligence here, we're gonna move on to the next question, and we're gonna go with one person for the answer. We can certainly wrap up and kind of chime in with our added answers afterwards. But Barry, do you want to share one of our next questions?
Absolutely, and I will follow up with the panel, and we will get answers to every question as part of the follow-up. So if we don't get to you, we promise we will. This is from Diane, who on this call has pitched live on stage and received funds for their own companies. Tell me about the experience, and even adding if you've pitched and you didn't get any funds.
Ooh, who wants to take that one on? So in essence, the question is, I'm looking for somebody who's actually been through the experience where they're looking for funding and were successful in gaining that funding. Talk about the experience that they had.
I don't pitch on stage. I just see all the pitches.
There you go. There you go. Zainab, did you need to find funding for your business when you launched it?
Well, for my business, I did bootstrap, and I haven't formally pitched yet in front of a panel. So that must be quite an interesting journey to go through. I would say, just from a general perspective, I've been doing a lot of research because right now I'm very interested in financial inclusion of marginalized women. And the platform that I'm creating is it's Fund Evolve, whereby we want women to start having access to wealth planning, even though they might feel that they don't have much money. So we need to start building those roadblocks that exist in our minds when it comes to wealth and how we associate with wealth. So when it comes to pitching, I would say that it's important to know your business inside and out. Most investors, they want to first know how exactly you're going to be making money and what's the cost of acquiring a new client. So these are the types of points to be considering when you are going through this whole process of creating a pitch deck, seeking out other entrepreneurs who have been successful at raising funding. That's where you will get a lot of insight that you would never get from Google or YouTube. So it's important to actually talk to other founders who have gone through the process. I hope that helps you.
That's a great answer. I mean, again, go back to your network, pitch your network, see what they say. They'll be able to give you some of the feedback that you're looking for. That's going to help to strengthen it. Barry, do you want to move on to a next question?
Absolutely. This is from Cindy. How do we teach and empower and open doors for more women to take on startup board roles or advisory board roles?
Brenda, can I throw that one to you?
That's a great question. Because as we know, women are missing on especially big corporate boards and boards where we need to have our say, and women are missing in politics. That's a whole nother discussion. I think the best thing for women is to find your mentors and to find, first of all, find out what you're interested in, what board positions interest you. Join a board that speaks to your values and to your mission in your life and what you want to accomplish. But a lot of it, boards are looking for a lot of people. There's excuse me, online organizations that advertise for board positions. There's a lot out there. But it is hard to break down the barriers for women into the bigger corporate boards that pay. There's a lot of boards you can get onto as a volunteer, but it's almost very, very impossible for women to get onto the bigger boards that pay. So I find that really challenging, and I've done a lot of work on that. I've done all I can to see what doors I can open, and it is a challenge, and we have to push back on the system. And the government has made boards and government agencies are supposed to have 30 to 40% female representatives on their board, and it's not happening, and nobody seems to be enforcing that or being talking about it. So the past 2 years have really put a dent in that progressive movement. So I think for women, don't be afraid to apply. You have just as much skill set and education and talent and everything that a man would have. But don't say, oh, well, they might not want me, or I don't know if I have the skill set. Men never say that. Men never say, I don't know. So let's just stop that negative thinking and think, you know what, I'm really great. Look at my resume. Look what I've done. Look what I can do. Any board would want me, and apply.
That's great. That's great. Absolutely. Great advice. Barry, the next question.
This is one Jennifer's been waiting patiently. Do you know any angel investors who invest in women founders, Web3, and wellness? And I think that can probably expand to any angel investors investing in women, but.
Okay. Hesse.
Yeah, I know some on the American side, but I would perhaps archangels here. I know they have invested in wellness technology. Web3, it's like right now I wouldn't invest in it myself, but I'll have to take a look. Now, are you in the US or Canada? Because a lot of the investors right now in the US, like the big ones like AZ16, are big proponents for Web3. But why don't you contact me afterwards, and then maybe I could see if I could find a list for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Hesse. Again, it's insane the amount of questions we've got. This has obviously been a great conversation. And as Barry mentioned, we will address all of the questions thereafter and get back to you. But we are going to kind of close off the session. We've got about 5 minutes left. And with that, I'm going to get each of you to chime in on the following with a nice, quick, brief statement so we don't keep these folks past 1 o'clock. Women's economic power is the key to unlocking gender equality or gender equity. This includes participating equally in existing markets, acting as directors on boards, as venture capitalists, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, and as meaningful participants at all levels of economic decision making. How can we as women help unlock our equity within the economy? Can I start with Brenda?
Sure. Use your own purchasing power. Buy from women-owned businesses. Search them out, find them, and support them. Mentor, share your networks. Listen to them. Be a guiding voice. Be on their little board of advisors and directors. Bottom line is just reach out and support and be there for them.
Awesome. Thank you. Joanne, how about you?
I'll build on that a little bit and talk about like being on a board, like start early, find if it is just an advisor role. I see lots of founders that are just a couple of years maybe in, I've already have some battle scars that they're going back and being advisors to even earlier stage companies. So just start to build your network there, take some courses in understanding the board governance and the things that you have to do on that, because that will help you later on as you want to, like as Brenda mentioned, getting onto maybe a larger board or a board that would pay you. And also like using your own investment power as well. There's lots of ways that you could be investing in female-led companies out there now through different, collaborative forums or crowdfunding ways. With it, Women's Equity Lab is an organization that we're launching an angel fund in the Valley that has 4 chapters in Canada there. And I think that there's others. And so, no better way. I know that we're all busy and not to add more to our plate, but, put yourself on the other side of the table and it will, I think, only help you.
That's an excellent piece of advice. Zanab, what about yourself?
For myself, I think that we need to start changing the landscape through empowering minds, because an empowered mind does not operate from a gendered lens. It's much more concerned with creating an opportunity and having an impact. And of course, women, let's just start championing other women. It's not just through mentorship, but also sponsorship. Let's start opening doors, because if you're in that position of power, of influence, let's start making those introductions and becoming personally invested in the development of other women, because we know how challenging it is to get to this level, and we can start breaking that cycle.
Excellent. Hessie.
I would say, like, in addition to that, try to always take a meeting, no matter what, without prejudging. I mean, I know we get spammed all the time in many places, but I mean, as women, I think we need to be able to change our mindset and support in that way. I always say before a meeting, how can I help? Because I think that puts somebody at ease in turn when they start pitching and saying, I can do this, I can do that, but give them at least some kind of indication that you are there to help them. Promoting others, like really small things on social media, share their trials, their asks, their successes, help amplify them. I have 2 platforms where I can help promote women who want to share their stories. And, and like right now, if you have a pitch, or are you a woman who has a technology that wants to talk about responsible tech or whatever, I have 2 platforms where I want to promote you. So get in touch with me.
That's great. Thank you, Hessie. And we'll close with Survey.
Join eQuo. eQuo is going to be launching their alpha. I think they are accepting anybody who is willing, and you can join as a community supporter. You can join as an investor, as Jennifer mentioned before. And I think just looking at the chat and the richness that was here, and I'm like, oh my God, when eQuo is like as a product, it's connecting, like the speakers who are here, it's bringing these conversations forward and bringing the resource that everybody has that value that they're going to bring. And you can find mentorship. you can find the talent, you can find the investment that you're looking for, not just from conventional VCs. So eQuo is the future, and I'm not just speaking as an advisor or as an investor myself. I'm speaking from what benefits it's already providing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Serby. You've actually taken my Vanna White away from me with that closing, which is absolutely great. If you hadn't realized, all these fabulous ladies that are on the panel today are all part of the eQuo community, and are going to help us launch this phenomenal platform in the spring. We have a Facebook and LinkedIn community page as well. So if you have questions like some of the stuff that we're talking about today, and you have these questions, we have community members that can answer them for you. So get involved with eQuo, join us, and we welcome, very happy to have you. Thank you all very, very much for taking the time to share all of this important intelligence with our group today. Really appreciate it, and thank you all for being part of eQuo. We appreciate your support.